Hey guys, welcome back to another edition of the Cool Sports Network. I am your host, Chase Coburn, and today I am joined by a very special guest, the former general manager for the New York Jets and current ESPN Front Office Insider, Mike Tannenbaum. Mike, welcome to the show.
Chase, great to be with you.
We are so glad to have you on. Obviously, you're one of the bigger names and insiders in football. So again, it's amazing to have you on today to talk some football. And you've done so many different things, across your career as an announcer. You've ran your own business, and we'll get into all of that. But one thing that you also do is you teach football business management at Columbia University. So before we really break down, your thoughts on some of the biggest topics in football, teach us a little bit about what it takes to become the general manager of an NFL team.
I would say, Chase, start with a lot of luck. Right place at the right time. A lot of people believed in me before I deserved to. But I would just say generally, whether you're trying to be a GM or be a teacher, a plumber, a farmer, a computer programmer, I think a few principles like apply. Create value. Understand what your client or your boss is looking for, what their respective pain point he or she may have. Be a great listener. Don't complain. Be the first one in and the last to leave.
Amazing. And being the general manager, and you're right, because it's very interesting how a lot of these jobs, it takes the same kind of mental skills to get to that point. But as a general manager, one of the biggest things you have to do is draft the players, make those right draft picks. What was the craziest draft day scenario that happened while you were the GM at New York?
Yeah, well, actually, I'll take it to Miami because I think that's one of the craziest ones of all time was Laramie Tunsil. Larry was a really good person, really good player at the University of Mississippi. He had done something that he wasn't proud of. It got caught on video, and that video got out about an hour before the draft. And some teams decided that they weren't going to be comfortable taking him because of that. So he was the number one player on our board, and we were able to get him at 13. And I think the lessons from that, Chase, are fall back on your preparation. Don't overreact emotionally, good or bad. And when other people are panicking, sometimes it turns out to be a great opportunity, as it did with Laramie, who's still one of the best tackles in football. And I would note also one of the best people I've ever been around.
Absolutely. And I think one of the biggest things, though, is also looking, are they great people as well? But again, as you mentioned, Laramie, he seems like a good guy. You take him. Is there anybody that you regret not taking in the draft that you're kind of looking back and you're like, how did I miss on him?
Well, I think everybody that was associated with pro football in 2000 who didn't draft Tom Brady in the first 5 rounds that we had an opportunity to do so is probably saying like, oh my God, how do we not do that? So we drafted Chad Pennington. We had two other good quarterbacks at the time in Vinny Testaverde and Ray Lucas. Chad went on to have a really good career. Obviously his career wasn't as good as the Hall of Famer. We had a lot of good information on Tom, but like other people, we had a lot of question marks because he wasn't the full-time starter at Michigan.
Right. Yeah. I mean, a lot of teams passed up on him. You're not the only ones who did that. He ends up with New England, becomes one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. How has being a general manager previously, though, helped you now understand the game better as an announcer and as an insider?
I try to take the audience to places they can't go. So, recently, we've been talking a little bit about, for example, Jamar Chase, and Jamar Chase is embroiled in a negotiation with the Bengals. Well, I negotiated with the Bengals. Obviously, context for me was in the context of a trade, but I could take people, behind the scenes and say, hey, here's what's really going on. Here's, what's going on and why. And so I try to bring the audience to places ordinarily they couldn't get to.
And I think one of the things you're trying to do to try to just make, the general manager's point of view more understood. You started a company, the 33rd Team. It's a company that I follow. You guys are doing some great stuff over there. Can you tell the audience a little bit about that?
Sure. We if you go to our website, the33rdteam.com, the whole idea of it is there's 32 NFL teams and us. Right. So we think of the world as there's 33. So let's just hope the NFL doesn't expand. And we're really fortunate to have a lot of former players, coaches, GMs that create content. I've learned a lot. It's been a very rewarding experience.
That's amazing. And you guys have really done some great things over there with what you guys call the football think tank. And I've obviously, learned a lot from the things I look at over there. But we need to talk about some of the current things that are going on in football. And an opinion that you've had, I guess you could say somewhat recently, is that Patrick Mahomes is the only player in the sport that you'd rather have than Jordan Love as your franchise quarterback. Now, after just one season as a starter, why do you think so highly of Love and his abilities going forward in the future?
Yeah, I'm not really going to back away from that, Chase. I would just give some slight context. I think the question was, who would you start a team with today? And so, do I love Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow? Yes, yes, and yes. I'm a big Justin Herbert fan. But when you factor in all the things like health, longevity, athleticism, age, I would start, if you and I were running an NFL team and we could pick any player in the world, I think we would agree Patrick Mahomes would be number one. But two for me would be Love. And I think he has all the ability in the world. We saw that last year. He got better as the season went on. I thought he was incredible in the playoffs. And when you think about his size at 6'4", his short area quickness, his accuracy, his pre-snap decision-making, I think he checks all the boxes.
And clearly the Packers thought so as well. They signed him to a 4-year contract just about a month ago, not even a month ago, that made him the highest paid player in the history of the game. And this is not new. Teams appear to have no fear when signing quarterbacks to these record breaking extensions. And as someone who was a general manager, if you were in this position now, seeing what these teams are doing with these quarterback salaries, would you be a little more hesitant about paying a quarterback generational money? Because we've seen probably about 10 guys now being paid that kind of amount.
Chase, that's a great question. I think if you have a difference maker, absolutely. But that B market, I have a lot more questions than answers on that because, look, it just when you pay, the salary cap's $255 and you're paying a quarterback $50 million and he's good, not great, do the math. You have 52 other players to pay with $200 million. Now, you could push out cap charges and all, but at the end of the day, like, that's your budget. So how you put that together is really important.
It definitely is. And I think a team that is going to start to face some struggles is the Dallas Cowboys because they're in a weird spot where Dak Prescott will be up for an extension after this year. CD Lamb also wants some money. Maybe even Michael Parsons will want an extension as he is going into his 4th season now. If you're the Cowboys, do you follow the trend of paying a quarterback like Dak record breaking money, or do you prioritize keeping guys like Lamb and Parsons?
Yeah, I probably keep all three. Dak was second in the MVP. And it was interesting, Chase. They didn't take a quarterback in this year's draft. They knew that he'd be a free agent at the end of the year. Now, so is Cooper Rush and Trey Lance. So they don't have a lot of options right now, and you can't franchise Dak. So they're sort of like boxing themselves into a corner.
Do you feel quarterbacks have, I guess you could say, too much leverage in these situations? And that, like, because at what point does a quarterback, if they're at least in somewhat of a great tier, they're going to reset the market? At least at this point, and it feels like the quarterbacks kind of have the leverage in this situation. Is player empowerment good, do you think, for the league, at least in this kind of case?
I think it's really the context. Like some players can get away with holding out, like we're seeing Brandon Ayuk hold out, Trent Williams, Jamar Chase. Others just can't get away with that. There's thousands of NFL players, and we're talking about 5. So some players really have, the ability to do what they're doing, CD Lamb, but by and large, most players just couldn't get away with it. So I think it's really like market forces working where, it goes back to supply and demand. There's just not enough Patrick Mahomes. So if you're Patrick Mahomes or Jordan Love, Lamar, you're going to get paid really, really well. But for a lot of those other guys, they're very replaceable.
So you just mentioned Brandon Ayuk and him holding out. Reports say the 49ers are close to making a deal to get rid of Ayuk, who has requested a trade. That's been a whole process throughout the entire offseason. How would you handle a situation like this if you're San Francisco? And I even think the better question, what value do you think they should expect to get in return for a player that probably won't play for them this season and the team that's getting him that probably has a lot of the leverage in the trade?
Yeah, well, we got to be a little careful there because a couple of things. First of all, I think San Francisco's done a great job. They drafted Ricky Pearsall in the 1st round, Jacob Cowan from Arizona in the 4th round. They have Jennings and obviously Deebo Samuel on the roster, so they're pretty well equipped if Ayuk leaves. I still think he'll get a pretty good. I think I'd be surprised if they get at least a 1st-round pick. And I think if you're a team like Pittsburgh, you have to think like, is it really worth giving up a 1st-round pick and all this money for Brandon Ayuk?
Do you think he is worth that kind of money? Because we're seeing right now all these guys who on all these different guys on San Francisco, these playmakers, McCaffrey, Debo, Brock Purdy, Kyle Juszczyk, George Kittle. These are so many guys that could allow him to have great opportunities. If he gets traded to another team, do you think he'll be worth that kind of money? Will he be that same difference maker in an offense?
He's pretty close to that, and he's a great route runner. He could go deep, really good ball skills, and while we're seeing more and more receivers come out, he's pretty good. And again, because he could score touchdowns, someone's going to pay him, and I can understand why we're in the situation we're in.
Let's transition a little bit back to some of the quarterback salaries. And one of the controversies the past few years has been kind of the running backs and their pay. What are your thoughts around paying a running back to a long-term contract?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of dogma around that. Like, I pay good football players like Saquon Barkley, Alvin Kamara, certainly Christian McCaffrey. Like, I think you pay those guys. And again, on a $255 million cap, are they worth $10, $12 million a year? Yeah, I think so, especially someone like Barkley who's so dynamic out of the backfield. So not all running backs are created equal, and pay the really good ones.
How about someone like Derrick Henry, someone who's like a veteran, you sign him to a 2-year deal, someone like that who's
Yeah,
nearing the age of 30 with experience. Do you pay them?
yeah, I think you have to, and I've made this mistake before, Chase. You're talking about being a GM before. You have to be very disciplined to say, this is where Derrick Henry is, and here's the value in 2024, not what he's done in the past. And that's easier said than done sometimes. So I think it was a great signing. Baltimore had 3 fourth quarter leads that they blew last year. I think Derrick Henry, I believe in pass, score, and run to win. And I think Derrick Henry will be a meaningful addition to their team.
So we're talking about all these salaries and who gets paid what. The quarterback position will clearly get paid the most. I think there are 17 guys that get paid more than any other position at quarterback. But what is the next best position that you think teams should prioritize the most to sign, and which positions have the most value to other teams?
Left tackle. If you can't protect, nothing else matters. So, show me a good offensive line, I'll show you a good offense. Without that, it's really hard to be successful.
Do you think the Niners are in a tough spot now because with Ayuk, but they also have to pay Trent Williams? Do you think Williams has the leverage a little bit?
Um, that one's interesting to me. He's getting up there in years. He's still a really good player. I was in that situation a number of years ago with Darrelle Revis. There's always a landing spot, sort of like Hassan Reddick and the Jets. There's always a landing spot, and hopefully, they can figure out a solution that works for everybody.
What are your thoughts on Hassan Reddick, someone that the Jets trade for, and then now all of a sudden he's really not playing? Do you think some of these situations where guys are holding out, is that good for the league, whether it be Reddick or Williams or Ayuk? Like, do you think it's good for the league for these guys to be holding out or having player empowerment, or should it be more up to the front office and the organizations?
Yeah, we're not talking about that many players, so I don't, I think it's something I like to closely monitor, but I don't think we're talking about a lot of players here. I think the Jets are handling it right. I would not negotiate with somebody that hasn't helped the program. So I think they're handling it right. If he shows up, that's something different.
There was a discussion going around the NFL about them possibly expanding to 18 regular season games. And as a general manager, working with players and understanding their side and contract negotiations and just how they are as people, do you think this would be fair to the players? And what are your overall thoughts around expanding to 18 games after we just expanded to 17 games?
Yeah, well, I think if they get more money, then that's certainly something, I don't think they should play another game, an extra game, and not get compensated for their services. And then I think you have to look at how much they're playing in the preseason. So it's really the incremental amount of, shifting one more regular and preseason game. So I would proceed with caution because, player health is the most important thing. So maybe you have a second bye week, maybe you expand the rosters, maybe you have more flexibility on the IR. I think there has to be some other discussions that go along with that.
I think Joe Burrow was mentioning that as well, maybe putting the Pro Bowl in the middle of the season or trying to work it out so that teams have 2 weeks off in the middle of the year before they may have to make a push for the postseason. Speaking of Joe Burrow, his division rival, the Baltimore Ravens, they had a pretty busy but productive, I guess you could say, offseason. They added Derrick Henry, but they also lost a ton of pieces, and they seem to have some weaknesses on the roster. What are your thoughts around Baltimore and what they can achieve this coming year?
If their offensive line, like Rosengarten, holds up at right tackle, I think they're going to be pretty good. They're going to have to get some production out of Wiggins. their first rounder, the corner from Clemson, who's long and fast. They also lost a lot of good coaches as well. So we'll
Right.
see. That defensive staff's very young. But I'm not betting against John Harbaugh. He's been too good for too long.
For someone that was a general manager, how important could you tell it is to have kind of a coaching staff together, even just the positional coaches? How important is it, and how much of an impact do they make to the players on the team?
Yeah, continuity is important, but you want to see people move on. That's the indice of success. So developing coaches, staff, players, like that's all part of a healthy organization.
Yeah, I actually was just speaking with Baltimore Sun writer Mike Preston about the Baltimore Ravens, and he thinks that the loss of all these positional coaches are definitely going to hurt them. But hey, they have Lamar Jackson, Roquan Smith, Kyle Hamilton. We'll see what they can achieve. They are clearly a candidate to win the Super Bowl this coming year. Kansas City's looking for a three-peat. Many different storylines that are surrounding this NFL season. We've been waiting all episode to hear who is your early prediction on August 18th. Who do you have coming away with the Super Bowl this year?
Gonna go with Jordan Love in Green Bay. I'm all in on him, so why not stop now? So I think they'll beat the Chiefs in New Orleans, and they'll. I think Jordan Love has that sort of ability, and I think they're that deep on both sides of the ball. Now, some of their younger defensive guys like Van Ness, first rounder from a year ago, is going to have to get better. But big believer in the Packers.
Amazing. Yeah, you're clearly high on Jordan Love, and I love it. And they made some great offensive additions this year. I'm very high on Luke Musgrave as a pass catcher. So I think they have a lot of talents on that team that go a little unnoticed. So, yes, they will be definitely a team to watch out for after all their success last year. But, Mike, I have to ask you, and there are many people out there that would love to be a general manager of a team and go through that process. If you had to give one piece of advice to an aspiring general manager listening to this right now, what would it be and why?
Resilience. There'll be bumps in the road. There'll be days, months, years where it's tough, hard. You'll get credit for things you don't deserve. You'll get blamed for other things. And to have sustainability, you need mental toughness, resilience, and not to delve too personally, but like you also have to have like economic staying power, meaning like do this for the right reasons, because there'll be a long period of time you're not going to make a lot of money, which is fine. I was always about choose a job you love. You'll never work a day in your life.
That's amazing. And I don't think you have to work a day in your life. You get to talk about football for a living now. And you're obviously doing some great things. Mike Tannenbaum, thank you so much for jumping on the podcast today and talking some football with us. We appreciate it.
All right, Chase. Thanks so much. Take care.
Thank you. I appreciate it. We will wrap up the episode here alongside ESPN Front Office Insider Mike Tannenbaum. I am your host, Chase Coburn, and we will see you next time right here from the Cool Sports Network.